there's a way to get rid of that, but whatever. Hmm? Hmm.
Okay, I think that's all right. Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody, and just wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. I've got one of my favorite content creators, actually, that I follow on YouTube. It's Deconverted Man. I think a lot of the people who follow my channel will know who you are already, but for those of you who don't, I've got his a link to his channel pinned, or not pinned, but posted in the description of this video. And I'll make sure after we shoot this, I'm going to go in and edit in a thumbnail that. Princess Sapphire created. It's very creative. It's really funny. We got a photo of Deconverted Man and a title and stuff. So I'll put that into the video and then make sure that his contact information, as far as getting a hold of his YouTube channel, make sure that link is working and I got the right one in there. Deconverted Man talks a lot about, really on his channel, focuses on formal and informal logic. And he addresses a lot of the really bad arguments that we see on the internet. And he's actually a really funny guy as well. So I really enjoy watching his content. I think you guys will like it. I'm going to let him introduce himself and what he does with his channel. And then we're going to just get right into it. So go ahead, Deconverted Man. Do your thing, brother.
Objective Ethics here. And I've got Deconverted Man. Wait, no, the other way around. I yell on my channel various different volumes to start the videos because YouTube. Yeah, I'm Deconverted Man. Was a Christian from the age of 8 to 32, and so when I made my YouTube channel, I was like, well, I'm not converted anymore, so I'm deconverted, and I thought that I was the one that came up with that. But other people separately from me have come up with that term, and also the term deconstructing. I've seen that thrown around. Yeah, so oh, he's vanished. Oh, wow.
I'm just hitting buttons trying to figure all this out. So that I didn't know I could do that. So yeah, I need to figure. Okay, let me
don't worry.
Focus on you.
Yeah. All right. I was like, oh no, I'm on my own again. But yeah, so yeah, I focus on logic. That was one of the primary linchpin, if you will, of things that allowed me or forced me to deconvert from my belief. And I think that learning informal logic or formal logic will change the way that you think about the world and look at the world and help you to avoid bad arguments and potentially make good ones. So I guess that's my intro. And also there's something to do with lobsters that happens now and again because I don't know.
That's a great beginning. Yeah, I have been involved in a lot of conversations on different platforms with theists. My channel, I discuss philosophy, theology, social issues, politics. I also do stuff for mental health and physical fitness, so it's pretty diverse. But in my interactions, with people on the internet, I really try to focus on um, creating an environment where people with different views can come together and have kind of respectful disagreements. But it is very difficult, that a lot of atheists and agnostics like myself, we get really frustrated because we ask simple, direct questions and we get these really crazy runaround circular arguments that ultimately offer nothing. They bring no substance whatsoever to the conversation. And I will say that when it comes to personal experiences, my own view on that is I don't discredit people's personal experiences because I just feel that's disrespectful. You got to let people live their own life at some point. But if I'm asking for some kind of actual evidence, something that's outside of your own mind, then I expect you to either be honest and say, look, I don't have anything other than my personal experiences, and that's good enough for me. But if you start telling me that, God created the world, look at the trees, or whatever bullshit you get, that's when I start to get frustrated. And I think a lot of atheists are with me and agnostics are with me on that, because when the tables are turned, when the theists ask the skeptics direct questions, almost always we give direct answers because it's pretty simple. We're just trying to have a linear conversation. So the communication needs to be a two-way street, in my opinion. So I want to jump into 3 of the most common arguments that I hear on the internet, and we're going to save the best one for last because it is really aggravating. It's we're going to just a teaser. It's called tag. It is the transcendental argument for God. And some big players are using this argument, like the Think Institute, Joel and his buddy. I can't remember the other guy's name. He's trained his little protege, but that is just ridiculous. But we'll get into that. So let's start by letting Deacon Verdeman actually explain what formal and informal logic is, so we have a good grounding here.
Okay, so yeah, simple. So we've got formal logic and informal logic, and of the two, informal logic's actually relatively new, created, if you will, in early 1980s, maybe a little bit earlier than that, at least in academia. So probably existed before then in academia, but 70s, 80s, something like that. And the terminology was what it was because whoever decided that. But we don't, who cares about history? So what are these things? Formal logic deals with more abstract notions and formulas, broadly speaking. You're not dealing with cats and dogs, but with A and B variables that substitute for something real, but not said what that real thing is. So A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. And that works perfectly fine in formal logic. But if we said apple equals banana, banana equals carrot, and then apple equals carrot, it just suddenly falls apart. So it only works because the abstract is the how of the formula. So why does the plus symbol make things add? Well, because we said so. And why is 1 + 1 2? That's how things work. And so you get to this point where you can't ask more questions about how the system works. So you get into axioms and tautologies with that sort of thing. So it's pretty complex and darn deep as far as all the things that formal logic can go into. And I'm still trying to learn it. And I'm just more about informal logic because that's a lot easier for me to understand. It's more intuitive for me. And an informal logic deals with natural language. And there of the cats and dogs and mice and lobsters and all that real world things. And we can say something like all men are mortal. So Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. It's simple, it's nice, it's pure, it's sound, it's it's a beautiful thing. So an argument has to be sound to matter. You'll hear valid and sound. So valid is the structure, premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. You can have more premises, but you have to have at least 2. And then sound is referring to whether or not the premises are true. And so if you don't have a sound argument, then that means you have to be skeptical of the conclusion, and that means to hold that conclusion in question. You don't know if it's true, you don't know if it's false. All you know is that the argument sucked, and you can't say that it's false, you can't say that it's true. So you're just skeptical about it. You don't know. The argument sucked. Go fix your argument, come back. Or if you're the one that made the argument, you discovered that it sucked, you need to fix your own argument. Now, the word or the words, if you will, of natural language, that refers to the way that we talk, no matter what language we're talking in. Different words can have slightly different meanings or wildly different meanings to different people. So I did a survey of a number of non-believers and found that there was a lot of disagreement with what one word means, but then there was a lot of agreement on a different word. So everyone seems to agree on this one word and this one concept and what that should mean to all of us collectively speaking, whereas this other word, everyone had their own kind of idea of how we should treat that word. So that's kind of neat. And it also creates a problem in discussion and in in debate and in informal logic, one that is unresolvable because of the nature of the beast. The only solution would be an artificial language where you had a certain word mean only a certain thing. And constructing, there are artificial languages that already exist, but constructing a one to one natural language, as far as I know, has never been done. So whoever does that will get some sort of award, more than likely, I would think. Um, so when I read or hear your argument, I have to know what you mean by this word. And so you need to define your words. And then, even if I personally have my view of that word, I tentatively agree with your definition of that word within your own argument to see whether or not your argument still works within that framework you've provided. So then the analysis can begin with that understanding. All right.
Yeah, and I really actually I'm glad you mentioned that survey because I had that was in the back of my mind for something I wanted to ask you about later. I would love to discuss that survey in more detail with you at some point. I did, as you know, I referred a lot of people to that survey. I thought you did an excellent job with those questions. They were not only very thought provoking, but I think people who take that survey and people who read the survey, I think it can be very productive because I agree with you 100%. One of the biggest problems that I see in communication, frankly, communicating about anything is definitions of terms. So as you know, I'm a moral realist. I believe in the objective moral model. And when I have a lot of discussions with my atheist or agnostic friends, I find that there's actually a lot more common ground than it seems like because what we're really doing is we're using so many terms differently, and we're kind of there's a lot of crosstalk and stuff. And so, and I see this, when you have conversations with the theists, there's a lot of just misunderstanding, and it's so common. And then one of the frustrating things I do have actually when I do talk to theists, and I don't want to just accuse people of being malicious about things because you never know a person's intentions and stuff like that. But it's so easy to find the truth, quote unquote, on the internet nowadays. It's literally just a keyboard away. And I constantly see theists mislabeling atheism as this positive claim that there is no God. And that's all atheists. Now I'm an agnostic, so I don't really have to deal with that as much. So I'm more on the outside looking in. But it blows me away how many videos you can go on almost any atheist YouTube channel and find out that atheism is this massive umbrella term that covers hard atheism, which is, of course, the active claim that there is no God. You've got soft atheism. There's people who refer to themselves now as agnostic atheists. You can also look at different theist or religious models like Buddhism or Taoism that don't actually have a God character, which is technically atheist. So, I mean, atheism is this massive, broad, umbrella term, very much like theism. If theists would not like it, like the Catholics would not like it if we treated them all as if they were Muslims. No, 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 I don't believe in Allah. What are you saying? But that's really what it is. When you talk to a theist, if you're going to have a productive conversation, then you need to find out, well, what kind of a theist are you? Are you a Christian? Are you a Catholic? Oh, what kind of Christian are you? Are you a Baptist? Are you a Calvinist? Do you think everything was predetermined? I mean, there's just so much nuance to it. And I thought your survey asked some of these questions. What does atheism mean to an atheist? And then what does atheism mean to a theist? And I'd be really curious to see. I know you're going to do a video, I think, at some point about that. Please do keep me posted on that because I want to probably do some kind of like reaction video or something to that because it was a good survey. And I really, in fact, after this video posts and I go back in to edit that thumbnail in, I'm going to put a link to that survey in this description. I'm so glad you brought that up. That was such a good survey.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. I was very humbly surprised, if you will, at the response, and thanks to you for dragging people in left and right, and all of a sudden I had more data that I could shake a stick at, and I realized that I had doomed myself to insanity by allowing it to be audio responses as well as text. And I'm like, oh, what kind of problem am I going to get into? Nobody will make a 3-hour video about this. And somebody made a 3-hour video about it. So, oh well, that's okay. More data, yay! But I thought about the psychology of the people going in, and I thought, when I've had atheist questions that can't be answered, or questions for atheists from theists or whatever, and it's usually a setup. It's almost always a setup. There's it's a blue moon with cheese on top when it's not a setup, where the questions are legitimately like, I want to know what this is. It's usually that they'll then go, oh, see what they answered. Now I'm going to straw man that statement that they made and isolate it and cherry pick it so I can use it to prove a point I want to make. You see how they said that morals weren't objective? Ha ha! I am right. See, those pesky, evil atheists, heathen, skeptical minded, nitwits. And so, and then you'll hear they'll ask a question and then they'll say something about the answer to the question. And I'm like, well, you've already got your mind made up on the answer. Why even ask me? You already seem to know me better than I know myself. And so if they're an apologist, they have a clear-cut agenda, which is to do apologetics, which of course is defense of something. So apologetics, technically, we're apologists. But apologetics has been more widely relegated to Christian apologetics because they were the ones that came up with doing it in the first place, broadly speaking. So when you say apologetics, people just kind of go, oh, Christian apologetics, because that's what we see the most of. But technically the word apologetic on its own just means to give a defense of. And that's fine. I'll be an atheist apologetic. I don't care. The term atheist, of course, has a history, a very strong history in academia of being there is no God. And that's what it was for I don't know how long, a long time. And then something happened with a couple of buildings you might have remembered from a particular September a while ago. And then there was another building and then another plane and all these terrible things that happened. And in response to that event, all of a sudden books appeared that were against God. And then people called this the New Atheist Movement. And new atheism was somehow different than old atheism because these new atheists were saying, I don't believe in God. I'm not necessarily saying that there's no God. Maybe I'm also saying that, but I'm more saying that I don't believe in God. And this was seen as a changing of the guard of the language. And so people, that new atheism, they redefined the word atheist. If you go and look at William Lane Craig's old argument, like with Christopher Hitchens, he was like, oh, you don't even know what the word atheist is. And this is what it means. You're actually agnostic. And it's like, who cares what his label is? He still doesn't believe in God. What's it matter? But he was trying to win a technical point in academic fashion, whereas the layman audience has no idea what these words are, what they mean, or whether they care or not. It's way easier also to frame an argument of black and white, that theist is God, atheist therefore is not God, and so yes to God, no to God, than to say yes with caveats and no with caveats, because it's an easier framework. If I say it's either black or white, there is no gray, and it's way easier to think in those terms. The red team versus the blue team. I like my team. And it's like, well, sports are beyond me. This is a weird phenomenon. You're rooting for, what are you rooting for? Because those players can go get jobs in the other team that you were against. You used to love that player. Now they're over there. You hate them now because they're not on your team. So who are you? What are you rooting for exactly? You're rooting for the name, because they're, So it's really weird how we do. And maybe you still like that player. Oh man, that player's good. He was so much better when he was on my team. And you say things like this: my team? You own the team? It's not your team, But that's just how we think. So we see that in politics, of course. And there's a the liberals versus the those alt rights and alt left and alt control alt delete and or whatever other things they're coming up with, and it's an us versus them mentality that we easily settle into and just go, yeah, I can do this. So it's ease. So the zeitgeist, if you will, which is a weird word, but I love that word. And of course, there was a movie that used it a lot. I can't remember the name, but I'll remember it later if somebody reminds me. But the zeitgeist of what the word atheist means has changed, perhaps in part because of the new atheist movement. And you had things like American Atheists as a society, as a entity come into existence. And on their page, it says atheism just means a lack of belief in God. So they are choosing the second, and then it got so prevalent, the second definition was added to dictionaries online, and also I'd assume in the physical world of books and whatnot. But for a long time, the word atheist just meant like one thing. Now it means two. And the word theist, it means more than one thing, but we generally view it as just one thing. So it was kind of a cultural shift that happened. And so people found it useful to say, no, the word atheist, it means that second one, that second definition to me and to many others. So that's what we're going to champion. And you had a few stick cards. There's one individual that comes to mind that if people have been around a while, they've probably heard of him. So I don't know if I need to say his name per se, but he would always argue the word atheist needs to be, there is no God. It has to be this. And he had an argument. I analyzed it years ago. And the argument was almost perfectly sound. And I say that there was there's a caveat there that if you crossed it, it wouldn't be sound anymore. And the caveat was it cannot be you have to use it this way, but that it should be used this way. And he was right on the line. And I think that the way he presented his arguments and the way that he made his arguments, and still does to this day, is it seems like he's saying it, you have to do it, when I think he should modify his language to say, this is how I want it to be done. Because there's a big difference between, you must, cross the street when the light's green versus, you should cross the street when the light's green or something like that, but at any rate, so
Yeah, no, you touched on a few things before I forget that I did want to mention. So, as a lot of people who follow me know, I actually did study after undergraduate school. I actually went to a Bible seminary for a time, and I actually did study some of this formally. And one of the classes I took was actually on the origins of atheism and agnosticism. And the other thing that you touched on that I had also studied is I took some coursework on apologetics. And just to touch apologetics really quick, the biggest problem with apologetics and apologists in general, what's happening is you're starting with the conclusion and you're working your way backwards. And the reason this is so problematic is because anything that you discover that doesn't line up with your presupposed conclusion, you reject that. So all you're looking for, it reminds me of one of the fallacies, I believe it's called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, right? Where you just fire a bunch of shots and then you draw a circle around whatever you hit and you're like, hey, look, I hit a bullseye, And this is extremely problematic because apologetics is not an attempt to discover the truth. And people who say that, they constantly say, oh, we're trying to discover the truth. This is not what apologetics is. Apologetics is it's technically defined, I believe, as a reasonable justification for what you believe, right? And by definition, in theistic circles, it's reasonable justification. And so when you start putting these really great sounding words like reasonable in your sentence, suddenly it makes it sound so logical and reasonable and intelligent and etc. And it's absolutely not. What it means is basically you're looking for any argument that does not violate one of the three laws of logic. And unfortunately for the theists, in particular Christianity, and especially Trinitarians, to be honest with you cannot get into an argument that doesn't violate some laws of logic. It's just impossible. And one of the biggest problems we have, which we're going to get into here directly, is actually the logical problems with the arguments. But that's what apologetics is you're trying to avoid logical contradictions. And what ends up happening is when you have conversations with biblical literalists, which is a big problem in religious circles, is they start running to the not impossible. Well, it's not impossible that Belshazzar was related to Nebuchadnezzar, even though we know for a fact historically that his father was Nabonidus, and Nabonidus took the throne through a coup, and there was no relation from Belshazzar to go to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was never a throne name. I've talked about the book of Daniel for those of you who may not be aware, but at any rate, I mean, you go into, and then people say, well, it's not impossible that Belshazzar was the son or grandson of some female that was technically like Nebuchadnezzar's aunt or something. It's like, oh my God, it's
I mean, come on, objective ethics. I mean, you're being too nitpicky. We're all related to each other, I mean, we're all brothers and sisters, technically speaking.
Those details, those crazy details. I will be doing a breakdown at some point of Daniel. It's one of the other courses that I took, and one of my favorite periods in history is that Persian period. And Daniel, because Daniel was written probably around 165, right? And he's trying to push the narrative back into like the 6th century, fifth and 6th century. And the history was so difficult back then because the source material was so scarce and so unreliable. I mean, we think of one of the greatest historians of the time would have been Herodotus, and he's extremely unreliable. I mean, he just makes shit up all the time, So whoever wrote the book of Daniel just pulled names out of the hat and just did a really bad job of mixing things up. There was no Darius the Mede. Darius was not a Mede. There's no record whatsoever of Darius the Mede. And I could go on, and we're not talking about Daniel right now, but yeah. And so, what you talked about there, when I mentioned the origins of atheism and agnosticism, I actually did a video, Tristan Gabriel on 21st Century Minds channel. For those of you who don't know, he's got a great channel. He interviewed me. In fact, that was really my start in YouTube here a few months ago when I started actually getting onto people's panels and live streams and stuff. And he actually did an interview with me, and we discussed the origins of atheism and agnosticism. And Deconverted Man, you're absolutely right. And this goes back actually to ancient Greece, and it's atheos, which is without God. And that's where the new atheist movement said, oh, all it means is just without God, because atheos is how this translates. Technically, the term atheism actually comes from French derivative of atheisme. It's not even from atheos, directly. And excuse me, in the without God in Greece, in ancient Greece, this term was used to describe people who actively rejected the existence of the gods. It's what we call hard atheism these days. And agnosticism is without knowledge. And this was a term for people who neither believe nor disbelieve, but who do believe that it's impossible to know whether or not gods or supernatural phenomena are true, because we can't test and measure these things. Agnosticism has not really changed. You get some slight variations depending on what dictionary you look at, but agnosticism has pretty much always been, it's just we don't think it's possible to know. We neither believe nor disbelieve. But theists will be like, oh, you're a fence rider. You're trying to hedge your bets or whatever.
Agnostic has classically been the butt of the joke for everybody. It's like, oh, they can't decide what.
Right, exactly.
What's funny about that word, of course, with my survey, which at some point I'll publish my results and all that. I'm still, my brother's helping me to try to sort it out because there's so much data. I'm like, I just need it organized in this way so I can see it visually. Like I have it now. Like I need to print it, and I don't have to print it. It's a mess. But anyways, I suppose I could do it that way. But anyways, was agnostic. What was the word agnostic mean? apparently it now means I don't know. So there will be another definition to agnostic added to the dictionary. Mark my words. That's what people online that I not just non-believers, but I, from memory, if I had bothered to write it down, that would have been nice, but I have to use my memory of interactions I've had with theists. So take it with how much salt you want, watch your salt intake, is that they also mean I don't know. And this whole idea of not being able to know, that's gone. It just means literally I don't know if there is or isn't a God. That's what it means to a lot of people now. I don't know how many because my survey is very small. I would love, a 10 million person survey of just finding out what people mean or what they think the word agnostic means to, get a really good handle on that. But I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I would put money on that the word agnostic will develop a second definition that means just I don't know, in addition to the classical agnostic that we're familiar with.
Now, that's a really good point too, and that's something that I need to highlight more because, and I think I did touch on it a little bit at the beginning of this conversation with people talking past each other with stuff. When you're having a conversation with somebody, the most respectful thing and the most effective thing that you can do is try to come to an agreement about what are the meanings are we going to agree on, because language is fluid. We invent this stuff, right? So that means that we can change it any fucking time that we want to, technically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, isn't there a fallacy, in fact, called like a dictionary fallacy or something?
Where they appealed to dictionary.
Okay, right.
This occurs if and when you say, well, this is how that word is used, and you're not using it that way, so your whole argument falls apart. Well, that's not, that's not part of how it works, because this word means whatever the bleep I said it means. This is why we go back. We kind of go between these two realms of what's called informal and formal logic, where it's like, well, what was a cat anyways? And you go, well, describe a cat. And like, well, I can't do that. Why not? Because you can't describe cat. It's a universal. You can only describe a type of cat, which is a particular. What the bleep's a universal and particular? I just told you what it is. Cat is universal, and you can't draw a cat. You can't think cat in the same way you can't think triangle. You can only think of a type of triangle. I say the word triangle, an image in your head appears, if you will, or some people don't think that way, but I do, of, that. Yeah, but that was a particular type of triangle, not a very good one either, because my fingers aren't straight, but that wasn't triangle. And so now you're like, now you're getting back into the variable A, B, C, D, X, whatever letters you want, or numbers or anything else. And you're like, it's too fluid. I'm going back to that, because that, at least I could go A equals B equals C. Okay, I got it. Here's the formula. Now I'll go back. Okay, cat was there. Where did I go wrong? What did I mean by cat? Okay, and then I have to do all that. And that's why every now and then you'll hear me bring up truth tables, which I dread because they're notoriously difficult to do, but they're absolutely necessary for establishing that a word is this thing that I've said it is. And even though you don't want to use it that way, and I don't want to maybe use it that way, we're going to use it that way because here's this thing that says here's how we're going to use it. But I cannot just say that's the truth because the dictionary says so, because that's an appeal to authority. Who cares what the dictionary says? Who cares what I say? What matters is kind of like, here we got to establish this as a rule that we're going to say this word in this way because I've set that up to be that way in my argument. Now, the flexibility of that, of course, some people have said, oh, well, I'll just take God and I'll make God the thing that everyone has to agree to. God is an axiom now. Oh, yeah, your move, checkmate, atheist. Aha. And I'm like, great. So God's an object of the mind then. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, axioms are they're just in here. They're not out here. They don't exist. They're not real. They're in here. And then that kind of melts their brain because they didn't learn informal logic. They didn't learn formal logic. So if you personally, whoever you might be, haven't read or studied through informal logic, at least a book on it, if not more than one book, then you don't know these things. And then I like to refresh myself on this stuff because I'm bound to forget something at some point. So like I was, so there you go.
No, you're absolutely right. I really appreciate you going into so much detail because it does help to understand, one, what we're talking about, and two, you're creating some really good visual aids that people can grab onto because people learn, they take in knowledge differently. Some people are very visual, some people, are more practical or however they would say that. So let's go ahead, since we're talking so much about logic, let's jump into our first argument for God's existence. And I'm going to run through, it's called the Kalam cosmological argument for people who don't know. And this argument is fairly popular because I think the attraction to it is it's a syllogistic argument. And so that always makes people feel really smart when they're putting together a syllogism, right? My premises lead to my conclusion, therefore I must be right. But there are problems with it. So it's a very simple two premises leading to a conclusion. The first premise is everything that exists began to exist. The second premise is the universe exists. And so therefore then the universe began to exist. So this is an argument for the creation of the universe, right? This is the creationists argument. So the first premise, Deacon Birdman, everything that exists began to exist. What do you think about that premise?
Right. Well, usually it's phrased as everything that began to exist has a cause, but however you want to frame it.
Right.
Actually, the framing does matter. The way that you assemble these words matters a lot to the argument, because if you format those words differently, the argument can fall apart just from syntax.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
That is actually
you're right.
Yeah,
I'm just using the argument. That's all right. It's fine,
yeah.
Because you're basing it on memory or whatever, and fair enough. I just am so used to the argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. So this was made popular by good old William Lane Craig. Why? Well, it was part of his dissertation. It was the Kalam was his dissertation. So he championed this, and he also tried to champion monolithism as a theology, but that kind of didn't pay out for him as much as the Kalam did. But people were like, oh, yeah, Kalam, I can understand that. And the Kalam is actually developed based on an argument that already existed by a Muslim. So actually it should be arguing for Allah, not Yahweh. But whatever, the Christians are like, oh, that's a very nice argument you have. Ours, and they're like, hey, you can't do that. Yes, we can. Oh, I guess you can. So it works for lots of gods, which is interesting. But the Kalam's not about God. It's just about whether the universe began to exist. And we have to break down that first premise. So I have a video on this where I break down all the fallacies of the Kalam called simply KCA. But if you want to just have a short way to debunk it, the Planck temperature does it for you. And the Kalam, I keep, it used to be full screen here. The Kalam rests upon the universe cosmology being the Big Bang cosmology. Now, cosmologists don't necessarily agree that is the best way to view the world or universe, but it seems to be the best explanation we have so far, or at least the most true explanation. And they're doing their science stuff, so I don't know. But in Big Bang cosmology, the universe gets smaller and smaller as you go backwards in time. And when it gets to a certain size, if you will, you run into this thing called Planck temperature. And in this universe, you have to imagine that everything is super hot, and it's stupid numbers hot. Like, it's, I forget offhand, but it's like 64 to the power of 72, whatever the bleep it is. It's some inconceivably big number that I can't think in my brain. And it's like, well, how hot is that? It's so hot that neutrons and protons aren't. They don't exist yet. So there is literally no physics that we can there is no physics because there's nothing even there yet except for heat. I don't know how that works, but there you go. It's just really hot. And it's so hot that basically atoms can't form. You have to wait a moment or two, cool it down a bit. You have to cool it down, and then protons and neutrons can come into existence, but they can't. The electrons can't join in because it's still too hot. So you have to wait a little bit more, blow on it a couple more times, wait for that universe to cool down, and then the electrons can join in, and then you can have some fun with atoms and molecules. But in that first state, it's very hard, if not impossible, to picture a universe without atoms or subatomic particles, the building blocks of everything that we know. In this hot state, they aren't, because it's too hot. If you stepped in from this universe that we're in now to the Planck temperature universe, you don't get to die. You just don't be. You aren't anymore instantly. There is no anything of you. There's nothing, because all your molecules and subatomic particles can't exist anymore. It just go, whoo! You don't even know that you're dead, because you're just gone. It's just instant vaporization of everything molecularly. And so the Planck temperature is a killing for the Coulomb because it relies on cause and effect. Well, that works perfectly fine in the universe that we have. But you're not talking about the universe we have in this Planck universe. You're talking about a universe without physics as we understand it. Now, there is some physics governing it. There is some force, rules, laws that work, but scientists say, we don't know. And so if they don't know, they're doing the math and they're trying to figure it out, and they're like, we don't know. Physics as we understand it breaks down, so we don't know what's going on there. As a logician, somebody that enjoys logic, you recognize that the laws of logic, as we call them, A equals A doesn't equal not A, and A or B. There you go. Law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. Those laws work nice in this universe. If you're talking about this Planck universe, I don't know what the hell happens there. It's too hot. Maybe A equals A, but maybe A doesn't equal A, because maybe that's not how that universe works. I don't know. It's too hot. I can't work under these conditions. So I can't say anything meaningful about this super hot universe. I can't say cause and effect works in that universe. I can't say logic, as I understand it, or you understand it, or as we understand it, works in that universe. We hope it does. We think it does, but maybe not. So until we figure out how that type of universe of heat is, we can't map logic correctly onto it, because we're like, well, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, it seems like A equals A. Wouldn't that still be true in that universe? I don't know. It's, so the Coulomb then just runs into a firewall, if you will, and melts because of the extreme heat of Planck's temperature. And that, I think, is the easiest easy way of debunking the Coulomb. So say, yeah, sure, Planck's temperature, here, you're dead. Anyways, and they're like, wait, you can't just say Planck's temperature. Yes, I can. That's it. That debunked it. That's it. You're dead. All right. And you can then list all the logical fallacies as well. But you don't have to memorize all those. You can just say, hey, Planck's temperature. It ruins it. But of course, if Big Bang cosmology turns out to be wrong, then the Planck temperature is wrong. And then you can have cause and effect going backwards in time. But then the Kalam can't be right because it requires cause and effect, which is banking on the Big Bang cosmology is correct. So, oops.
There's actually two things that I see with that. First of all, one of the logical fallacies, I believe it's called special pleading, where if you say, oh, okay, well, if everything that exists had a beginning or had a cause, what caused God? Oh, no, no, no. God doesn't qualify, right? So now
yeah,
you're
well, this kind of
way out.
This just blows all that. You don't need to focus on the logical fallacies of the argument itself. You can, I do, but this just fact of how reality would function blows away all necessity of saying, well, here's all the fallacies. Well, I'll tell you what the fallacies are, but I would suggest, I would endorse, if you will, that if you want to, you don't have to, can't tell you what to do, adopt the mentality of just saying Planck temperature, the end. That's it. Once you go figure out Planck temperature, and after you do that, then come back and try the Kalam again. Because right now it runs into that firewall. But yeah, as far as logical fallacies go on its own without going into the science of Planck temperature, the first statement is parts in the whole fallacy, also known as the compositional fallacy. So, this can is made out of some aluminum. So therefore, the drink is made out of aluminum. Wait, what? Or my microphone is made up of plastic mostly. So the whole microphone is plastic. Well, that's not necessarily true. So it's trying to arrive at a conclusion about the entire system from observation of about one aspect of the system. So everything shares this feature in common. Therefore, that's true of the thing that everything is, which is the universe. And of course, there's other problems. The universe is a thing? Is it? I don't, so you have vague language. And they framed it as begins to exist to try to get around God not having a beginning. They did that deliberately because the argument used to be, everything that exists has a cause. And they're like, well, wait, no, not God though. Oh, I don't know what to do with that. And then this guy, Muslim came along. It's like, aha, I have a way. Aha, so that's why they frame it that way. Is, as you said, they started with the conclusion of God first and worked backwards. Like, how do I get there? That sounds like I'm not making this special pleading. I want to get rid of that fallacy. So the things that begin to exist, those have causes. Well, we don't know that that's true. Doesn't matter. We're going to say that it's true because it seems true. And then we're going to say, oh, well, but what caused God? God never began to exist. It's always existed. Aha. So he's not in the category of things that begin to exist. So no special pleading. Aren't I smart? So yeah, there you go.
There's actually, all right. How do I get myself back on here? There's actually the way that I actually address this particular argument is, as you mentioned, Planck temperature is a really good way to go. Another way to go that really blows their head right off their shoulders is we actually know in physics that there are things that are self-caused or that have an internal cause. And a lot of theists, when you tell them, they're like, no way, but we have such a solid understanding of this and so much evidence of this. One of the primary things that you can focus on is the radioactive decay law, which this is actually a self-caused phenomenon and time is not a factor. So when you start, citing some of the laws of physics, like you mentioned with Planck temperature, for example, you can actually look at things in the natural universe that completely debunk that argument. You could go back to the Planck temperature, or you can say, fine, the universe is simply a phenomenon of a self-caused event. And someone will say, it can't be self-caused. And you say, absolutely, look up the radioactive decay law, for example. So there are things that can essentially cause themselves. There's another argument that I don't use because for one thing, I'm not convinced it's true. But if you really want to just mess with people, there is an argument to be made that you can actually get something from nothing, because technically speaking, if there's nothing, there's no laws of logic or physics that prevent something from just popping up out of thin air. And again, I don't use this argument, but it is kind of fun sometimes to run people
Yeah.
down that road. But
Yeah, that's kind of a tangent, perhaps, but yeah, it's fine. But yeah, in regards to the argument in and of itself, of course, the vagueness of the language is a problem. They didn't define these words. Uh, Obviously, the argument's not doing the heavy lifting. You need stuff that says what the words mean. What does it mean to begin to exist? I don't know. So intuitively, you're like, okay, you mean like, okay, you kind of like have this grasp of it intuitively, like, okay, well, duh, I know things begin to exist. Well, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, here's lobster guy, how's it going? Yeah, I'm lobster. Yeah. Okay, when did he begin to exist exactly? Like the red yarn that had to be made, and then the black eye plastic had to be made, and then all that, and then the stuffing had to be made, and we had to assemble that by hand or by a factory, and when it was done, was that when it began to exist? So there was some point that it wasn't this. There was one leg missing, so it wasn't yet done. It wasn't what it is. But when is it what it is? And you're like, well, forget it. You've gone too abstract again. So what does it mean to begin to exist? Go ahead and figure that one out, apologists. Well, they never really clarified because it's meant to stay vague, which is the exact opposite of what you do if you're actually making an argument. Is you don't want vague language. You want every term defined so that people know what the bleep you're talking about. And I have a book called Logic and Morals where I literally defined every single word that was used in the entire argument. So I'm like, there, no ambiguity. Ha ha. And but yeah, I mean, and of course William Lane Craig has all these defenses of the kalam that he keeps doing. I'm like, well, your arguments suck then. And it's like, because you keep having to say this is what it means. Like, it should have stood on its own. It should have been no vagueness of language. Things change state from one thing to the other. That's better language. Things come into existence as a label that we have decided upon as humans at T.1. Oh, there you go. Even better. You get more and more technical, and the thing gets longer and longer because you're aiming for precision of what you're saying. And so then you recognize, wait a minute, the first premise then falls apart because it's not worded that way. In my head it is, but why not rewrite the argument? And well, there's many reasons apologists don't rewrite the argument. I suspect this is kind of getting into philosophy of mind and whatever, so I can't say what their motive is, but I suspect that it's tradition. Church runs on tradition. So once you have an argument and it sounds good, you keep using it. That's why the St. Augustine or Anselm, his arguments are brought up all the time. And I can't remember if it's Augustine or Anselm. St. Anselm?
I think it's the maximally great being, if I remember right, Anselm's. I think so. No, you mentioned something that's really interesting about that, to touch on that, because
Augustine, sorry. St. Augustine's arguments.
Because the apologetics, one of the reasons that apologetics gets so much traction is because the apologetics arguments are not intended to convert people or convince skeptics. So that's why they never work to do that. What they are very effective at doing, and what they were ultimately designed to do, in my opinion, is to reassure the people who are already believers. Because I think one thing, not having ever been a believer myself, I've always been an agnostic, but I've talked to a lot of skeptics, a lot of atheists and agnostics, and I've also talked to a lot of theists. And my understanding is, at least anecdotally, is that the significant majority of people that have a religious belief at some point or another are kind of questioning the validity, because there's just so much information out there, so much evidence that we live in a natural world that we don't need to tack on the God concept at all to really explain anything. And as science continues to advance. And so I think it's natural for people to kind of question. Plus you have like the problem of suffering. That's certainly going to make people wonder, why is God let a baby be born with leukemia or whatever it might be, earthquakes and stuff, natural disasters. So there's a number of, excuse me, perfectly logical reasons to question these faiths. And these apologetic arguments, they're just designed to basically reassure, to soothe the believer. Don't worry, we've got a really solid foundation for this. Trust me, bro. It's all dialed in here. So I don't know if you have more you wanted to touch on the cosmological argument, or do you want to jump to the watchmaker?
I think Kalam's pretty dead, but yeah, I was going to say, whose name I couldn't remember because my brain, but now I do. He's the one that kind of started apologetics, if you will, at least formally speaking. He's like, here's arguments for God. He did that for, it seems, a legitimate reason, that because atheists at the time, maybe they weren't called that, but at the time, the skeptical people were using logic as the language to debate in. And he's like, we're not responding to them in their language. We need to engage in their language. So he made his arguments set up so that they were speaking at least the language of the time. And in his day, for what he knew about the world and what science knew, his arguments come pretty darn close to being sound. But now we know stuff about science that he didn't know, and it's like, oops, no, that's wrong. But even back then, there was still logical problems with his arguments, primarily because of what God is. He, at the end of every argument he makes, is, and this is what we call God. And it's like, well, that's nice, but who says that's what God is? Well, we do. Okay, but you need to show that that's what God is, which he didn't do. So it's a problem. Yeah, that. Anyways, yeah. The look at the trees argument, the watchmaker argument. Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, there's two common threads that we're gonna see as we go through these three arguments. That all presuppositional arguments that I've heard anyway fall victim to these two things. And one of them is, I believe it's called the definitional fallacy, where you're essentially trying to define this God into existence because you lack actual evidence. So you're arguing it into existence. I believe that's called the definitional fallacy, and that applies to every presup argument. The other thing that and you kind of almost hinted at this, and you're absolutely right. In a conversation, sometimes what I'll do with theists is I will just grant them the argument. I'll say, okay, I'll grant you the God. Now get me from the God to your Jesus God, or your Allah God, or your Zeus God, because there's a whole nother gap there that then they most usually have absolutely no argument for, because these arguments aren't really designed to get you to that necessary step, because it's a broken system. So if you just grant them, okay, let's grant that everything that exists did have a cause. I'll grant you the God cause. How do you know it's a mind, right? What gets you there, and what gets you to your specific God? So, and you're going to see that thread throughout all the presuppositional arguments here. So let's talk about watchmaker. So the watchmaker argument is one of the funniest arguments to me. It actually makes me laugh, because it started out as, well, if you were walking in a field and you found a watch, you wouldn't think that watch was formed naturally. You would know the watch had a designer. Well, think about how complex the universe is. Therefore, the universe must have a designer. And that was how it started. But now when I hear people use the argument, it's, well, imagine if you're walking around, you found an iPhone or a laptop or whatever the modern technology is. And it makes the argument shows how ridiculous this thing is. So why don't you talk a little bit about this wonderful watchmaker argument, also known as intelligent design?
Yeah, the watchmaker argument, as you said, I saw it was a beach that you were walking on, not not a forest. That's the wrong argument. No, it's the same thing, right? But you see a watch and you go, oh, I know that this was designed. It's too complicated. And then you look at the trees and go, wait a minute, watch, trees, and well, okay. It's an argument to and from analogy is what this is. Now, an argument from or to analogy might not be fallacious in nature. The fallacy occurs if and when the analogy breaks down. So you have to break the analogy for them because they don't understand why it's broken, or maybe they do and don't care. Who knows? So I've recontextualized this and said you're walking along the beach and you notice a triangle rock on the ground. Is it an arrowhead or is it just a rock? Did somebody design it to be an arrowhead, shape a rock with other rocks and their effort, or is it just a triangle-shaped rock? How do you know? How would you determine that? What methodology are you using to uncover the true nature of this supposed arrowhead? It could just be a triangle rock. You're not an expert in arrowheads. You might think that you notice this and that about it, but what are you going to use to determine if it is designed by non-nature, in the sense that it was designed by humans, but humans are nature, but it's designed with an intent, with a clear intent of being an arrowhead, whereas a triangle rock, it's a triangle rock. Maybe somebody used it as an arrowhead, but it wasn't shaped by human hands. So when we say designed, we mean it was designed to function in a certain way. So the arrowhead blows the analogy up and says, forget the watch. We're going to talk about arrowheads because there's a better real analogy that we can actually look at and say, here's something that might be designed or might not be designed. Let's ask the question of epistemology. How do we know what it is? And even more than that, how are we going to figure that out for myself and you and everybody else, that this triangle rock is just a rock versus it's an arrowhead made by humans? And if I don't have a clear-cut answer for that, this whole analogy dies in fire. But of course, the analogy doesn't want to do that, doesn't want to be honest. So they'll say, no, but it's really complex. The watch. And like, no, it's an arrowhead. Let's talk about it. And if you keep bringing it back to an arrowhead, then that's it. It's dead. But if you want to stick with the metaphor that they're using, and of course people have, they say, well, a watch is not like a tree. We've observed that people build watches. We've never observed anyone build a tree. And it's like, well, it's complex in nature. Actually, watch is somewhat simple. It's as simple as as you can try to get it. So it's another direction of attack that people go with is simplicity is a hallmark of design, not complexity. The more complex something is, the more likely it's going to break down. So if you added onto a watch more parts and unnecessary parts, then you would start to resemble a biological organism, because there's things that go wrong with biology that don't go wrong in watchmaking. Yeah, it's like, okay, so if you have a watchmaker who makes watches, but sometimes they explode, and sometimes they don't work, and sometimes they come out deformed, is this a good watchmaker? No, they're kind of dumb. Sure, they're intelligent, but they're kind of a moron too. They're not a very good designer. So if we really want to stick with the analogy, sure, you've got a designer. It's just a dumb one. So do you really want to stay with the analogy now? So you could go that way with it too. So yeah. Done.
This is absolutely one of the most broken arguments, because as a lot of people who follow me know, I'm actually a successful inventor. I invented an innovative tri-hole concept, and build boats, licensed by the Coast Guard to build boats. And so, as a designer, who I actually know firsthand that the very first thing that you do, so you come up with a concept, right? This is obviously the first phase. Then you might do some rough drafts. You can blueprint this out. Okay, now you're in the manufacturing phase. This is all in the prototype phase, first of all. So you're making your prototype. Okay, you've got a successful product or successful item, whatever it is, successful design. Before you go to production, the very next step is to go back, and it's called the streamlining process. You figure out how much extra shit you've got that you don't need, right? And how is there any way that we can make this more effective? And you streamline your design out as much as possible. And when you look at the universe, you see the exact opposite thing, especially when you look at things like evolution is a really great place to see. This is not streamlined. There is so much like junk DNA, so much stuff where you see unnecessary body parts, unnecessary organs. I mean, there's just so much in the world that we actually live in that is not streamlined, not even remotely streamlined. Okay. And if this creator, this designer is supposed to be this all-powerful, all-knowing being, you would expect to find the most streamlined design ever. That it would never,
Right.
there would never be anything as streamlined as this. And so,
Uh,
because we know it's the exact opposite of
right.
streamlined, it's extremely convoluted. And there's so much unnecessary shit. And so people will try to say, well, no, the laws of gravity, the laws of physics are so perfectly dialed in. Even that's not
Mm,
true. We could be,
mm,
I don't remember if it's thousands or millions of miles closer or farther from the sun. But there's this
mhm.
massive, we are the Goldilocks zone covers a
They
great distance.
exaggerated all of, yeah, the fine
Yeah,
tuning.
so it's like things could actually be different and still
Yeah,
function in the way they are right now.
right.
And we also don't have
Well,
any way of knowing what if there was no gravity. Well, maybe the universe would still work in a different way. I mean, we have no way to
mhm.
conceptualize some of this stuff, so we can't even make those claims. Those are just false
Right.
assumptions.
There's a couple of retreats or dodges or whatever you want to call it that they might make. They'll say, well, objective ethics, you made this, was it, it's not a certain, what do you call it? It's a kayak board.
Oh,
What
it's a
is
hybrid kayak stand-up paddleboard
hybrid kayak?
towable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hybrid. Yeah, but maybe you are obsessed with lobsters like Deconverted Man is, and so you want to honor them and have their skeleton built into the structure, and that's going to cost a little bit of money to do that. It's not going to affect the well, maybe it would affect to some degree its buoyancy and how. You know what? Now I want lobster skeleton in your board so I can buy one, but. Made for Deconverted Man on the bottom. uh, but if that's what you wanted, because you're the designer, you could build it that way. We don't know what's in your head, and it's like, yeah, okay. Or they could say, well, objective ethics is like super rich. You didn't know this, but he's actually like a millionaire, and he has unlimited. Actually, he's a quadrillion. He has unlimited funds. He has all the resources and time that there is. So he can waste materials on stuff that doesn't need to be there. And you're like, yeah, but why would he? Because he can. Because he wants to. We don't know his true ethics, his true motivations. So they appeal to this mystery. And of course, you're being substituted for God, of course, but this mystery of, well, we can't know its true motives or intent. And oh yeah, by the way, he's unlimited power, so he can build it with excess waste. Who cares? So you've admitted now that it's a bad designer. Yeah, but it doesn't matter because it's a good design, actually. You just don't have the full picture because you're not God, and God didn't bother to tell you why you put the lobster skeleton in your stand-up, boat kayak thing that Deconverted Man doesn't understand because it sounds like exercise, and I'm scared of exercise.
That is hilarious. No, I designed the. I don't want to go on to this tangent, but the
Yeah,
reason that I
yeah,
designed it is because I was really passionate about kayaking, surfing, stand up paddleboarding, all these different water activities. I'm one of these guys, and I was trying to get my friends and family to go down the river with me. and it was extremely dangerous for people who've never tried to get into a kayak before. But it can be very dangerous. It's a lot of fun, and I encourage people to try it out. But you need to go with people who know what they're doing. You need to be properly prepared. Everybody needs to wear a life jacket when you're out on the water. And I'm not just saying that so I don't get sued. I actually do believe that's true. And but at any rate, so I'm watching people get flipped upside down, and then the other problem is with the kayak situation. This can happen in canoeing as well. Is that getting back into the watercraft when you're on the water? I mean, it's like being on ice skates and trying to, do a dance or something. Like it's absolutely treacherous. You can hurt yourself more because the water where they're trying to go, they get the boat next to the shore, and of course you're talking about a river, so it's just full of all these rocks, and they're trying to get in this slippery thing, and they're falling into the rocks. And I said, there's got to be a safer way to do this. So what inspired me was trying to come up with something that was extremely stable, and then the idea just took off from there. But you're right. It wouldn't make any sense. I could absolutely put lobsters, somehow in the boat.
I demand lobster skeleton in my board.
As a homage to Deconverted Man, I should do something like that. But at any rate, the problem with that is, though, it would make me, as you mentioned, a bad designer. It would make me really incompetent. Even if the thing freaking worked, it wouldn't be the best possible setup. It wouldn't be the best design that it could be. And we would expect it to be the best if it was really what they're touting it to be. And they're hiding behind the not impossible again that we talked about earlier. Well, it's not impossible that God just threw a bunch of extra. He had all these extra parts left over, and he's like, fuck it, I'll just throw it into the cake. Now the cake's got raisins in it. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah. It's like, look, you could have painted a lobster on there. Wouldn't that serve the same? No, it has to be lobster bones. Why? Because I have them. What else am I going to do? Put them in a lobster? No. They go in, and so it's like, so it's an appeal to mystery is what that is. So you've gone from the watch, which its function, because we're familiar with watches. So another way you can go with the watchmaker argument is you find an alien artifact that nobody's ever seen, or you find something that you think is an alien artifact. You have to have something that you've never encountered before. And that's really hard to talk about in an analogy. It's like, well, how do you found this thing and you don't know what it is on the beach? Is it designed or is it nature? Or what is it? It's a thing. It's purple. And it's kind of round. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. What is it? I'm like, so it breaks down because you're like, So
there's another question I actually wanted to ask you about your advice or your opinion on this, because one of the things that I've pointed out, and I don't know if this is maybe my own ignorance and I'm just not that good at the argumentations and stuff like that, the counter arguments. But one of the things that I've observed is a problem that at least seems to be a problem in my view is that, okay, the argument doesn't, you don't, when you're walking on this beach or in the forest or wherever you find this stupid watch, the thing that you don't say that anyone making that argument, sorry guys, my wife she's having some hay fever. The thing that I don't hear people say is, oh, look, I found a watch. God made it. So you've got this like false equivalent or something.
Yes. And it's funny because they'll say, well, you wouldn't expect a watch to pop into existence, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why not? If we have a God that can do anything, why not? For all I know, the watch appeared just a second ago, along with that tree over there that you want me to look at. In fact, everything popped into existence according to you. Everything came into being because God made it, right? So at some point, there was nothing but God, and then God did something that made everything that wasn't God exist. How did that work? Well, they don't know that. There's no way to answer that. Well, we don't know. Okay, cool. So we don't know. So Carl Sagan, I think, in Cosmos said a lot of great things. One thing he said, well, why not save a step? And, if you're going to say the universe, if you're going to say God always existed, why not save a step and say the universe always existed? Now, I think you could replace it with reality and say reality instead of universe. Now, reality, whatever that is, God existed in that, right? Always. Cool. And you think God's a necessary prerequisite for reality. If there is no God, there's no reality. Okay. Interesting. I think that reality can function with or without God. I don't know which is true, but whatever is true is true. And so this proposition of a magical being that's a genie, essentially, that can pop things into existence, makes it so that the watch could have just appeared, and it's not nature and it's not humans, but it's God that made the watch appear on the beach. So, sure, now the analogy really falls apart because God also popped the trees into existence and the watch and everything else that we're talking about. So, where's now the comparison? There's no comparison anymore. That the watch is like the tree because they're both designed. Well, they both popped into existence. Well, no, because we know watches are made by people. No, God made the watch. Now what?
That's another question that I have with people when they talk about this. I say, well, if God did make this universe, right? What did God make this universe out of? Because if all that existed was this God being, right, and there was nothing there, then God just snapped his fingers and like you said, just poofed matter and energy into existence, and then he could. And then the other problem with it is that what about time? In order for God to actually do something, time has to already have been in existence. So God couldn't have created time because God can't. You can't be outside of time and create time. That becomes logically impossible.
The modern apologist has written God into non-existence. They've put God outside of space-time. So there is no when or where for God to operate anymore. I'm like, well, now you're an atheist. Congratulations. But they don't see it as a problem because God exists in a separate realm that they can't possibly hope to describe or explain. But it is a realm where there is no space, there is no time, but only God exists. But also angels and Jesus's body is there because reasons. Sure, why not? It's just it goes into ludicrousness at that point. And they'll
right next to the Trinity.
Yeah. I did a video on the Trinity and exposed it for breaking the law of identity. I'm like, look, it's three gods. No, it's three in one. And then they're trying to explain. I'm like, you can't explain it. That's the point. You're not supposed to try to explain it. You just go, this is a mystery, and that's how God works, is based on mystery. Catholics will tell you that.
That's literally what St. Thomas Aquinas said, and he's one of the greatest theological philosophers.
Yeah, that was the other one I was thinking of.
Great philosopher and a brilliant man, but when he even himself admitted that it's just a mystery, you have to just fall back on that in everything. That ultimately this is what the arguments come down to for the Christians. Oh, it's just a mystery. God's benevolence or something.
Yeah, Aquinas might be the word, not Augustine. See, I get these two guys.
St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, he made the arguments for the 5 ways. Augustine did arguments for God as well. I don't know who's first. I want to say it's Aquinas, but I don't know. Whatever. Whoever's first, that's who did it. But at any rate, So the watchmaker arguments appeal to and from analogy that breaks down, and I think we've successfully demonstrated many ways you could break it down for the theist. Who knows what will or won't work? So try them all. Hopefully, who knows? I don't know. And that's the thing is like, don't. The point is not. I'm not here to deconvert anyone, I just want them to learn. I want people to learn informal logic. So I keep telling people to do it. I don't know if that's going to work, but I'm going to keep trying because I don't know what else to do. It's just, and sometimes you don't know how to reach your goals. And that's what we do in life, is just kind of stumble through it and hope we make some sort of impact upon somebody in some way. And whether we do or not, if we make the effort, and the effort is made with the mindset of doing what you hope is good, then I think, well, you've done good then by definition. And maybe you were wrong. Well, then history will judge you, but you did the best with what knowledge you had. And yeah. kind of goes off track there, but
No, I think there's a great segue into our final presuppositional argument that I wanted to touch on today.
Oh, no.
I've seen videos that you've done, and in fact, I've seen conversations that you've attempted to have with theists who are running tag, and I don't blame you at all for the frustration. I just cannot believe that it gets so much traction. The people who run tag, the arrogance, and I'm not trying to be rude, but I just don't know how else to put it. It is the arrogance that they come off with, that this air of supreme confidence. You know, they've got the handle on knowledge and the basis of knowledge. And the problem with tag, which for those of you who don't know, this is the transcendental argument for God. It's the claim that without God, you have no basis for knowledge and no basis for what's called intelligibility. And there's so many problems with this. The biggest problem with it is it takes epistemology and ontology and just throws it into a blender. And so you don't know whether you're trying to figure out source or reason, you know, at the same time. It's just all mixed up into one. And I'm just going to just let you just tell us how much fun tag is and your favorite part about tag.
I would say it's the terrible apologetics of crap is what it, or terrible apologetics of God. There you go. Yeah, tag, you're it. So this is the I win argument. God's existence is a precondition for logic, morality, and knowledge to exist. And so there you go. Now you pesky person, your move. And you're like, what do you mean my move? That's it? Yeah. Okay. So debate me, bro, using knowledge, logic, and morality. Well, if I don't use logic, I'm illogical. If I'm not using knowledge, I'm stupid. And if I'm immoral, well, I'm a bad person. I have to use those to debate you. Yeah. So that means God exists. Haha. That's interesting. Okay, let's go over this, shall we? Logic, what is that? Well, it exists as an idea in the brain. And it's something that we kind of came up with to map to the reality we observe. Hypothetically, we can find out something new about reality, and that might affect how we must then do logic. And we could use thought experiments to dream up universes with vastly different rule sets. I'm reading from my script that I wrote earlier, just to let people know, transparency, where logic would function. Sorry, edit that part out later. We could dream up a different universe with different rule sets where logic functions differently. So if you don't know what a universe would be like under these conditions that then you shouldn't assume or assert that it would use logic as we know it. If you dream up Doctor Strange's universe where that works, magic works, or, well, it's not magic, it's just technology that requires you to say certain words and move your hands around and have a little device that lets you access the realm or whatever. So it looks like magic, but it's really science that we don't understand or whatever. But it's like, well, yeah, but there's laws of logic that apply to his universe that don't apply to our universe. And so we can dream up that universe and we can say, here's the rules. But if we were to say, well, here's a universe that I dream up and I don't know the rules of logic to it, well, then what can I say about logic other than I don't know? All right, so what logic is maps onto our understanding of reality. If reality was different, they'd be different. Things are different, they'd be different. So God could have made a vastly different reality with a vastly different set of logical rules. Sure. And so can you, because you can write a story and make up your own rules. But whatever those rules are, you had to come up with them. So if you're writing down, hey, here's a universe, I don't know the rules, then you can't later say, here's the rules, because you said, I don't know the rules. So so logic is that. It's what maps to reality. And it's also something we came up with that relies upon our observations of reality. Okay, so that's not a precondition for God anymore, is it? Because God has its own realm where logic still applies to God. So God equals God. That's the law of identity. So laws of logic are above God. God is subservient to the laws of logic then. They exist because there is a reality where this God exists. So there's some laws of logic, maybe they're unknown or unknowable, but there's something there that applies to that reality, and you can't just say that's God's nature because it is the sum total of that reality, which is also God, and then the laws of logic break down because you're not describing something anymore. It runs into incoherence, but so it doesn't seem that logic is required, or that God is required for logic. Then, the fundamental nature reality that is God, it would be subservient to logic. Let's see. So logic is a language that we would apply to God, and God's existence wouldn't negate logic, and the realm would simply not be if it did. And some other realm would be. And what's that realm like? No idea. It'd be pure speculation. So maybe you want to insist that without God, nothing would exist. That's nice. So what's nothing like? Are the rules of logic there? Or would the rules be something? How does that work? You don't know. Nobody could know. So then the idea of God is needed for logic fails at its core, because, and basically what they're really saying is that without God, there wouldn't be anything, even logic, but also there'd be a rule that makes it so that nothing can't make stuff, even though that wouldn't be nothing anymore. Don't worry about it. Okay, so what about morals? Oh, man. All right, well, morals, that one's easy. Evolution made morals, broadly speaking. We see other animals that have moral rule sets, game over. Next. What about knowledge? Well, that's just knowing stuff. You got a brain. You know stuff. You believe in stuff. That's it. No God required. So tag, you're it, but I always win. It's just circular. It's an affront to logic. And if you use tag, you have automatically failed. You have ignored the rules of logic. You've ignored everything, and you don't care because you just want to win. As far as the arrogant attitude and all that stuff, well, yeah, best not to comment on all that, perhaps.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, and that is, it comes down to the, like you said, it's the heads I win, tails you lose. You cannot, you cannot get around the circularity of the argument, and so the basis. The thing I tried to explain to people running tag is that we all have the same starting point. And if you don't accept that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you into hard solipsism.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only way to really just get out of this vicious cycle is you say, okay, well, we're going to run to hard solipsism then, because you have no way of knowing if you're just a brain in a vat and you just invented all of this God concept and everything else. You have absolutely no way to justify that. And tell them that, so listen, if you think you can solve hard solipsism, put out a peer-reviewed journal, you'll be a millionaire,
right.
Overnight.
Seitan Bergengate, who used tag and pre-sup arguments, said that he knows that solipsism isn't true because God told him. I don't know how that works, but
heads I win, tails you lose.
Yeah. And the fact that there's a coin proves that I'm right.
Right.
So and then Seitan Burgergate, there is an interesting phenomenon, maybe best left to psychologists to look at with people that use pre-sup and the attitudes that they display, because Seitan Burgergate very much meanie, meanie pants. And then Jim Bob was a bully through period. And this other guy I talked to, had an interview with at some point in my interviews with Thea's playlists somewhere, hopefully. He was like, "Oh, I love pre-sup. I like it." And when he started doing it, he switched his voice. He went into this annoying voice. He started, "Your worldview this. Yeah, how do you know that? How do you know?" And I'm like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Wait a minute. You're doing the pre-sup now with this." And he was like, "Yeah." And he didn't want me to realize it, but I did. And then when we were talking off air, I was just trying to explain something to him, and he started doing the voice to me. I'm like, "Okay, goodbye." And I'm like, "All right, okay, we'll see how well this works." It doesn't work, but gives you the artificial feeling like you won. So that makes dopamine and all that stuff. Like, haha, those atheists, they ran away because they couldn't argue with me. See how much I won? So it kind of encourages you to be a bully. Well, look, I made them run away. Haha, And so maybe I don't know. I don't know why it seems to be that people become jerks when they're using pre-sup, but seems to be the case. Now, of course, we have got Breakfast Tacos, who's an atheist that uses pre-sup atheism. And it's still annoying to listen to, but it's entertaining annoying. And it's like, well, it still rubs people the wrong way, though, because it's like, you can't just say that you win. It's not how it's done, but here you are doing it, and it's funny now because you're making a point, and hopefully people see that point. And I don't know. I don't know if his tactics will or won't be successful, but those are his tactics. And in fact, there was an atheist that thought he was being honest with his pre-sup. So it worked, convinced somebody at some point. And if you want to go against pre-sup, you have to learn informal logic or formal logic or both. And then you have to say, here's the problems with it. Here's the logical problems beyond just circular, which it has. But also what is logic and how does it work? And I kind of gave a brief overview of that in this somewhere hidden in my ramblings. So, and if you learn it, then you might be able to do a better job than I did. So learn it.
Well, Deconverted Man, I really appreciate that you came on today. I did pin the link just in case anybody wanted to jump in and talk about any of this stuff. The numbers of viewers are just going up and down and up and down, and I haven't used enough to know what that even means. Nobody's clicked the link to come in the back room, so I'm assuming that either people ran away when they heard tag, or they're in the back trying to figure out if they want to participate.
There's no one down there. No.
I do want to mention just a couple things in closing here. First of all, I want to thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate, I've been, as you know, working on my own model for objective morality, and you had reached out to me and offered your time and said if I wanted to talk to you. We spoke offline, but that was really helpful because you kind of gave me some structure when it came to the syllogistic side of things, which I've been working really hard on. I actually have a debate coming up with Mark Reed. I don't know if you knew about that or not. He saw my last debate I did. So I've done about 4 or 5 maybe formal debates now. Almost all of them have been about biblical morality, and I just did very well on those debates. It's a pretty easy debate to win, but I finally got an atheist to debate me about my actual model for objective morality, and that debate went very well. But Mark Reed is going to be a significantly tougher challenge. He is a really smart guy, and he reached out to me after seeing that last debate that I did, and he asked if I would debate him on the same topic. So we're setting that up, I think, on the Raging Tomato, and which is a big opportunity to kind of promote my channel. I'm really excited about that. I just want to make sure I don't embarrass myself. I don't know if I can beat a Mark Reed in a debate about anything. Well, he's so smart. But
I would say to that the thing that is easy to understand intellectually as a skeptic, but hard to accept internally, is it's good to fail, because
Mhm.
then you learn something new. So if you lose, good, because you learned something new. You learned where your argument sucked, and you now know what to fix. You might not know how to fix it, but at least you know something that you didn't know before. And oh yeah, that makes sense. But it's really hard to accept it emotionally because we don't want to lose, you know. So it's
Well,
good.
it is. There's a lot of pressure, and having been an athlete my whole life, I've had my wins and losses, and I understand how that whole thing works. And another thing is, I've been a very competitive person, but what's made me very successful in sports in particular is that the person I'm competing with the most is myself, actually, not my opponents, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds kind of strange, but if you're really competing with yourself to do the very best you can do, losing isn't as hard a pill to swallow, for one thing, and you're always willing to take on the toughest competition because you're really that's what pushes you to excel. And so when Mark reached out to me, I thought, man, this is probably going to be my first loss. And that's another thing. There's a lot of pressure because I haven't lost a debate yet. And so, you're going to lose at some point. If you play the game enough times, you throw the
Mm-hmm.
dice enough, you are going to lose. The house always wins, is what they say in gambling, right?
All right.
So eventually you're going to lose. And most likely this is going to be my first loss, but I'm going to give Mark my best effort. And like you said, if I do lose, he's going to help me to see where my argument breaks down, because
Mm-hmm.
more than anything, as a skeptic, what's most important to me is to try and line myself up with what's actually true.
Right.
And that's far more important than being right.
That's the
It's
point
nice
of
to be right. Oh, go
right.
ahead.
That's the whole point of doing logic at all is we want to know if the argument works or not. And if it doesn't work, okay, then we fix it until it does. And maybe we abandon it in full because we realize we can't fix it, and have to come up, start over from scratch. Uh, and that's the point of doing logic. It's a tool. To get to the truth, whatever that truth is, so yeah, more may logic prevail in that debate and in all debates.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Um, I I also wanted to mention, because I really appreciate the fact that my channel actually has grown very fast. I think this is my third week, and I'm creeping up to like 80 subscribers and I'm over 6,000 views on my videos already, and I just can't believe how fast that is growing. I didn't think I would get 25 subscribers in a month. To be honest with you, I really thought it was going to be slow, and I haven't even really started networking yet. So I'm
Mm.
excited that things are going like they are. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that so many people in the atheist community and even in the theist community gave me an opportunity to join their panels and kind of get my name out there and stuff. And so I always try to mention people in these videos as I think about it. Deconverted Man has a channel. I've linked that in the description of this video. Please do check that out. Who else should I mention? We've got Mark Reed, obviously has a channel. Better Than Ember, she has a channel. Check her channel out. Captive Desk, definitely support his efforts. I think he calls his show Saturday Night at the Atheist. Um, Austin Sims, the Kentucky Atheist, Joe, Ambushed Apostate. He's got a channel. I know I'm forgetting so many people. HG is it HG Roberts. Yeah, he's got a channel. I definitely recommend looking into his stuff. I'm trying to think of other atheist content creators. James Apperson, a gentleman who I really enjoy. I think he might have rebranded as a person non grata. So if you can't find James Apperson, try looking. I couldn't tell you how to spell it. So good luck with that. But he's brilliant. He's a funny guy too. And then on the theist side of things, I've interacted with Ace Philosophy. There's Dan McClellan. If you're looking for believers who are more into critical scholarship, CJ Cornwait is another one. You've got Gothics does stuff if you're into the theist side of things. I'm sure there's a number of theists that I've interacted with that I'm forgetting right now. But there are people on both sides of the aisle who've given me an opportunity to speak, and I've never had a bad conversation on any platform I've been on, because I try to approach things respectfully, and that seems to fare very well. It's an easy way to disarm people if you're just trying to, one, understand their position. And I think that's really important in a conversation. At the beginning of this interview with Deconverted Man, we talked about coming to an agreement on terms. Another thing I found very successful is if you can essentially try to steel man your opponent's argument, because this is actually a sign of respect. It shows that you're really trying to understand where they're coming from. So there's some methods you can use in psychology, and you might want to check into some things like that if you're really interested in having more productive conversations. If you're into it for a bloodbath, come out swinging, do your best, but make sure you've got a sound argument yourself, because you could look like a fool really quickly if you don't know what you're talking about. One of the things I find happening is a lot of people are getting really into this fallacy thing, and they're pointing fallacies at each other, and they don't even know what the hell they're talking about. They're calling out the wrong fallacies and this and that. So make sure
I've encountered that.
Yeah, make an argument, but make sure you know what you're talking about, or else be humble and say, I think, or I believe, or something like that. But I don't think there's anybody else who wants to join the panel. No, it doesn't look like anybody's jumping into the back room. Oh, okay. Very good. Yeah, we don't want to do any driving and talking. That's definitely something we avoid here. Why don't, Deconverted Man, why don't I let you have the last word? Is there anything you wanted to share about upcoming projects? We talked about the survey. Anything else you have going on?
Lobsters exist. I don't know what's going on. I do things randomly when I feel like it. So I never know what I'm going to do or when. That's how I have maintained my wonderful insanity that I do. And there's a lobster on my head now because reasons. I don't know why. I don't know why I do anything anymore. I regret. So much regret. The horror. Anyways, but no, I don't know. I don't have anything going on. I don't know. I have 3 books. Go read those. Go buy those. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. Didn't Dave do an audio?
Oh, yeah. Dave, yes, he read The Lobsterist out loud. And so if you don't feel like reading it yourself, you could just listen to him read it. And once you do, then you will be a lobsterist, because what I love about the lobsterist is it's got apologetics built into it. It tells you that because you've read it, you now know it's true. And if it's not true, then you haven't read it. It's beautiful. It's mwah. I don't know who made it, but they're genius and probably handsome and well endowed if they're a guy. And
who could we possibly be?
I don't know who that is. I don't know. They're very humble, though. It's not. I don't know who did it. It appeared one day, and I just knew about it, and I've been pointing to it. Nobody's ever debunked the lobsterist. No one's even tried. So I'm still waiting for the theist to try to debunk the lobsterist or the atheist. Nobody's done it. But Captive Desk is definitely a lobsterist now because he has read it out loud, and everybody that listened to him, because of the nature of it, must therefore be a lobsterist. And you and I don't know if you've read it or heard it. I know I have, so I am a lobsterist. So if you do read it or listen to it, you too will be one, even if you don't want to be one. Because once you hear it, then of course it's true. And if you don't believe it's true, then you didn't really hear it. It's great. It's wonderful. But yeah.
Well, I am convinced that lobsters exist.
There you go.
I'm also convinced that they are quite delicious. I don't know about the heresy.
No, heresy.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for logging in. Thank you for supporting the channel. Skeptic Philosophy, I think he does something on Saturday. I don't know if he's going right now. Check his channel out. And for those of you, if I forgot to mention you, I'm going to make a list at some point and actually come up with all the names and stuff. But thank you so much for the support, and it's a great community. Thank you, Deconverted Man, for coming on.
Bye, everybody. Bye. 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 I don't know. Oh, wait.